Before we get started with today's show, you know Ariel Helwani. You see him everywhere on ESPN. He's a really good MMA journalist. He's got a great MMA podcast called Ariel Helwani's MMA Show. Some episodes, he co-hosts with Daniel Cormier, one of the top 5 fighters in the sport. That's like me hosting a podcast with Russell Wilson. Just doesn't happen. Other times, he talks to not only the likes of Conor McGregor, but also people like The Rock, Kristaps Porzingis, and Shaq. It's a great listen several times a week, every week. Ariel Helwani's MMA Show. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Also, we'll be reading through Final Exam of the Jordan Rules by Sam Smith on Thursday with Joe Dumars. But remember to tune into The Last Dance, a behind-the-scenes look at the final championship of the Chicago Bulls dynasty. We're going to be discussing episodes 5 and 6 with Scoop Jackson here shortly, but the series continues this Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern on ESPN with episodes 7 and 8. You don't have access to ESPN? Go to ESPNInstantAccess.com to sign up today or listen to the Wrap-Up podcast hosted by Jalen and Jacoby immediately following the broadcast. Our coverage of The Last Dance is brought to you by State Farm. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Coverage is also brought to you by AT&T. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening wherever you get your podcast. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You didn't give us 4 stars. I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. Coming up on this episode, we are going to talk to my man Scoop Jackson of ESPN, talk about The Last Dance and more. But first, all right, Gabe. So I can't remember if I've told you, but, you know, I have watched the first 8 episodes of The Last Dance. I saw the first 8 before the first one had aired. So, you know, been a little bit ahead of the game on what's going on here. And so I knew that these episodes 5 and 6 were coming. And I was very, very curious to see how the race episode was going to go over. It's not really like the race episode as much as it is the Michael Jordan explains why he don't be explaining nothing episode. Okay. And this is one of those episodes where we get caught in a place where we have to remember Michael Jordan is a co-producer of this documentary, right? Like he has a role in this. And Michael Jordan is not here for anything that is particularly controversial or salacious. They made the decision, and I think it was a decision that had to be made, that what Mike did and did not do during the race with Harvey Gantt running against Jesse Helms in 1990, it was something that was going to have to come up because it was tied to the Republicans by Sneakers 2 line that he said in jest that Sam Smith reported, and then it turned into everything that it turned into. I do have to start by saying Republicans by Sneakers 2 is a great line, right? Like separate from the truth of it or anything else. Like if somebody says something to you, like, hey, they're my tennis shoes too. And in a group of people, that's something that's going to make people chuckle, right? Like it's absolutely there. But this is where Mike lost me on this. Mike's thing was, at that time in my life, I was simply focused on my craft. I wasn't worried about politics or anything else. The only thing I was worried about was my craft. He's like, look, is that selfish? Maybe, but that's where I was at the time. And I think that's fair. I think you have the right to kick it like that if you want to, even if you are Michael Jordan, right? I think that part has to be pointed out. Number 2, and I think this is something that's big that we have to remember. That dude was 27 years old when this happened. Like one thing I think that's really easy for us to forget as we watch this, like we're getting up to the retirement, right? Jordan was 30 when he retired. Like he was absurdly young. Like his general level of maturity that he had through the late 80s and early 90s, I think that's the part we don't give him enough credit for, right? He was mad young when all of this is going on. So if this is something that Mike didn't want to wade into, I can understand that. But where Mike lost me is when he says, at that time, that's how I saw things. Mike, that's how you see things now. That's how you do things now. I do recall that when it was really hot in these streets with the police killing black people and black people having enough of it, Michael Jordan put out something about that, and he made a donation to the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. In the same breath, he also made a donation to some like community policing organization. And then when you go through and like research that program, it was just like, oh, okay, you just gave some money to the police. Because Mike is going both sides on it. Mike does not want anybody to be offended. We saw this earlier in the Jordan rules. The public's affection is very important to Mike, and the idea of losing it is not something that he himself is willing to do, right? It matters that much to him. And he's carried that out the whole way. The closest thing I can think of to like a public statement on any matter political for Michael Jordan was the so-called bathroom bill in Charlotte a couple years ago. Mike put out a statement saying that he wasn't on board with that. Of course, Mike also owns an arena. And at that time, concert acts left and right were saying, I'm not going to play Charlotte. I'm not going to play North Carolina. They weren't going to do any of it because it is law. And so Mike's looking around and was like, hey, man, we got to fix this. And so he comes out on board with his money, right? There happened to be a cause that was on the other side of it, but Mike came out here on board with his money. That's what his get down has been from the very beginning. And if that's your get down, fine. I personally bristle a bit at the idea that somebody like Michael Jordan is obligated to say and do certain things on these larger issues only because nobody's asking Larry Bird to do anything, right? There's folks out here in Southern Indiana, all these places in the grips of the opioid epidemic, right? Ain't nobody demanding that Larry Bird show up. Right? Ain't nobody telling him like, hey, man, you need to go down there and save some lives. Nobody's telling him to do that. This is something that is only an obligation that's placed on black people. And so the fact that it's an obligation placed on black people to me is interesting because I am willing to entertain that push from black people because I understand where black folks are coming from here. Mike, you the one they'll listen to, right? They ain't out here listening to us, but if you the man and if they want to be like Mike, and of course the Jesse Helms race was before the Be Like Mike campaign, but if you the dude and they want to be like Mike, then let them be like Mike, right? Use that, leverage that, use that to do something that is bigger than yourself and something that can help people that otherwise don't have voices. Like I get where black people are coming from on that one. I ain't trying to hear none of that from white people. And the reason I ain't trying to hear none of that from white people is it has not been demonstrated to me that y'all actually care about these things, right? I haven't seen that. Not one single bit, not one single moment have I seen that. And it's interesting because for all the like, what about Chicago talk that you hear, none of the people who say, what about Chicago, look at Michael Jordan and say, hey, what are you doing for Chicago? They don't do that. They don't actually care, right? And so when I see these like documentaries and stuff, people are like, well, you know, there's this burden put on black people to do da-da-da-da-da and all that stuff. The burden that's put on black people in these moments is the burden of being black. Like black people are not the ones that are putting this burden on these athletes nearly as much as the circumstances are, nearly as much as the realization and the understanding that Michael Jordan is the rare voice that at least in theory, white folks are going to listen to about these things. And therefore looking at this as your chance to get something done. Yeah, you're going to look at Michael Jordan and ask like, yo, man, can you come through? I get where people are coming from here. Why are white folks interested in this discussion? Like, why are they? And I say that in both directions. If you're a white person who's out here saying, yeah, man, I sure wish Mike would do more. Why don't you ask Larry Bird to come do something for black people? They listen to Larry Bird more than they'll listen to Mike. Why don't you ask Larry Bird to do that? You ain't about to. On the flip side, if you're the white person, I don't understand why you're asking so much of Michael Jordan at this time. I know why you say that, but think about this. If something goes down with black people, the first folks you asking to come fix it are other black people. Right? Like that's where, you know, we talk about the stuff that's going on with the police. What's the first move? Well, maybe if y'all act right, maybe if y'all behave yourselves, the police wouldn't kill y'all, right? It gets thrown right back at us under those circumstances, which is why I say I don't believe the white folks are sincere when they had these discussions. And so it's not that your opinion doesn't matter. It matters like in some broad theoretical sense. But I am skeptical when it is white people who advance these issues the strongest. Right. And I think it's perfectly fair for me to be the person who does that. I think that those of you who are hearing me and know what I'm talking about, you get exactly why it is that I'm like, I don't know about this. But me and mine, we get to ask Mike some questions about this stuff. We get to look at Mike and wonder, like, why not? Because Jesse Helms, I mentioned this on Twitter, Gabe. I don't know if you saw this. Because Jesse Helms is not really a figure that, like, that name doesn't mean much to you, I'd imagine, at your age, right?
I had never heard of Jesse Helms.
Okay.
Before this doc, but in the aftermath of it, looking up what he was about and hearing what you had to say about him, it makes it all the more clear how important this was.
Yeah. Like Jesse Helms made his rise actually as a radio personality. That's how he got his name in North Carolina, was as a radio personality and a fairly far right dude. I mean, yeah. Like that's how he got on. But he was also a strident segregationists. Strident segregationists. That was the thing that he ran on for the longest, was basically racial animus. And to understand how long the racial animus continued with Jesse Helms, Carol Moseley Braun, I think she was elected to the Senate, first black woman elected to the Senate. I want to say that was in 1994. Jesse Helms got in an elevator with her once and literally whistled Dixie. Like in the 1990s. That was this man's get down. He was a polarizing enough figure that when Lou Holtz was the coach at Arkansas, it was getting a little shaky for him when he was there, but understand this. He recorded an ad for Jesse Helms' reelection campaign in his office in Fayetteville. Holtz used to coach at NC State, right? So I imagine that's where the connection was. Arkansas fired him for that. Arkansas, right? They were like, oh, wait a minute now. This is going a little bit too far here, buddy. He got fired for that, right? So this was the dude, and everybody knew who the dude was and what the dude was about. And they played it. The Last Dance did it subtly, where they played him after Helms won in 1990, and he said, "There's no joy in Mudville." Mudville's a reference to black people. That's what he ran on. You got to understand why it is that people in North Carolina are looking at Mike like, yo, can you say something? And I don't blame Mike. Look, I don't do electoral politics in public. So I don't blame Mike if that was the call that he made. He's like, yo, I just generally don't do this. But I get why people are looking at him. Because look, by the time it was over with Jesse Helms, you got to understand this. Most of the support that he had that was keeping him in office was really about his foreign policy, not about anything specific that he was doing for people in North Carolina, right? Like national forces were keeping him in office by the time it got there. It wasn't like this was a man of the people. And I don't think it would have been that risky for Michael Jordan to say something about Jesse Helms. But if it was that risky, this is what I want you to do the math on. What good is being Michael Jordan, right? If you can't say something about Jesse Helms, like what have you really amassed other than a bunch of money? If you can't say something about Jesse Helms, this is kind of the Bill Rhoden concept. Bill Rhoden wrote this book called $40 Million Slaves, which is an incredibly provocative title, right? And as an idea. And I think that people understandably struggle with the notion or struggle with the idea that somebody who makes as much money as these guys could be considered a quote unquote slave, right? But if Michael Jordan can't say, yo, Jesse Helms is bad news, without incurring risk, then what good is being Michael Jordan? Other than getting this money, right? That's the thing I want people to understand about like what the true dynamics are of like being black here. All that money Michael Jordan had, all that fame Michael Jordan had, all that celebrity Michael Jordan had, and Michael Jordan scared to say Jesse Helms is a racist, right? He can't do it. He can't do it. I don't know how much it would take for him to be at a place where he could be like, I can say this, and because I'm Michael Jordan, people gonna listen, right? And that's where I do think this gets to be kind of interesting. Does Michael Jordan have a tacit understanding of the limitations of his position, right? Does Michael Jordan have a tacit understanding that actually they don't love me like this? They don't really want to hear what I think about these things. Is that his tacit understanding? Or is it just him being like, look, I'm here to get this money and I'm going to get as much of this money as I can? And there's an argument behind that, right? The argument is basically that all there is for me to get out of this is money. All they're offering me is money. So I'm going to get as much of it as I can.
At the end of the episode, there was kind of this throwaway comment where he said, if I had to do it all over again, I'd tell people to not have me be their role model.
Yeah. He ain't giving back that money. This is the trade that he's made. I mean, and look, the fame is swallowing. Like I can't imagine how consuming it is to be Michael Jordan and be famous all the time. Cause I'm not even famous. I'm recognizable and I don't necessarily like it that much. You know, like imagine being Mike. I can't imagine what all the scrutiny is. And I think that it is okay. I legitimately do. Like Howard Bryant talks about this. He and I have some slight disagreement on this. Howard makes the point all the time that like there's a heritage, right? There's a tradition of guys who did things and broke down doors for you to get to where you are. And you owe it to those people to contribute to those who come after you. And I don't think he's wrong about that. I think there's a real point to that. I think in the way that I kick it, I think about it in that way. But I also recognize that this is a burden that's placed on us that really isn't placed on anybody else. Nobody else really has to do that. And so I can understand somebody bucking back. And the way I put it, I defend your American right to not give a about anybody else. Like, I defend, no matter who you are, I defend your right to not have to. Nobody else has to care about anybody else but us. We the ones that's got to do this for ourselves, and we got to do this for everybody else. So if Mike didn't want to do that, I get it. But be honest about the fact that you just don't want to do it. You know? Be honest about that. And he's like, what I did was I gave Harvey Gantt some money. It's cool that you gave Harvey Gantt money. I'm sure they could have used that money. But they could have used you more. And you didn't want to do that, and that's fine, because I can see myself under similar circumstances perhaps saying no, right? I'm not throwing this out there with like a terrible level of judgment. I get that. Just don't lie about what the circumstances are. Just don't be dishonest about what this is, and acknowledge Mike's right to do it, and acknowledge other people's right to look at it and say, nah, man, I think you probably could have / should have done more. There's arguments on both sides.
And it's a misunderstanding of what that money is going to do, right? Because you give money to a campaign like Harvey Gantt, what are they going to do with that money?
Right.
They're going to buy TV ads to try and persuade the public to side with their candidate.
Yes.
What is a priceless contribution to a campaign? An endorsement.
Exactly. Also, I say this, and this is something to consider, like when I talk about like what race is and like what it is to be Michael Jordan versus what it is to be Dean Smith. Okay. So in 2008, Dean Smith endorsed Barack Obama for president, and he did it via a letter that I'll always remember that was very interesting because the basis was largely in faith, right? Like he was offering that Barack Obama is a man like me, who is like you, who is a person of faith. And this is why this is, you know, who you should support. And he did that. But here's the thing. Dean Smith can endorse Barack Obama and it not be a big deal. By the way, I don't know how Dean Smith handled it with Jesse Helms, to be honest, with Dean Smith out there. Like, we're asking Dean Smith to carry the flag for Harvey Gantt. I have no idea. Because again, Dean Smith, one of the most courageous men in his world that I can think of. But Dean Smith does that and people are going to stop and listen, even if they disagree, right? People who are voting for McCain didn't see Dean Smith say, I'm going to vote for Barack Obama, and then be like, well, I'm out on Dean Smith. But Michael is petrified that he can say that about Jesse Helms and people be out on him. And guess what? Some of them will. The question is, Mike, why you care about those people? Does everybody have to love you? You know? And so I think there's complexities to this. And honestly, I don't think that The Last Dance got to that place because The Last Dance isn't there to get to the complexity of it. It's to tell Michael Jordan's story as Michael Jordan wishes for it to be seen. All right, it's that time of week where we have a guest on, and joining us live from Chicago, Illinois. He's one of my OGs. Y'all know, Scoop Jackson, man. Like, I can't even come up with the proper introduction for you, man.
That's perfect right there. Thank you, fam. Appreciate you, boy.
Dude, how you been, man? It's been a while since I talked to you.
I know it's been a long time, man, but it's good. I'm always good. You know how it is with us, man. You know, we can go months, we can go years without hollering at each other, but as soon as we come back, everything's still the same because you and I think, have a great understanding about the power of consistency.
Yes.
So it's always going to be that way.
Yes. And as I look at it, man, you kind of the blueprint for me. Like, I was the music dude who started doing the sports stuff. Like, that is you. You established that lane for cats like me to be able to do this.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you for making me feel like Yoda, man. Thank you.
It's all good, man. So how you enjoying The Last Dance?
I actually am enjoying it. I'm having to force myself to step away from being a journalist, step away from realizing and remembering that I was there during that whole run, and I was there at that time, and I was there for all of that, and I saw most stuff that nobody else saw. I also have to step away from the fact of that little bit of a feeling a certain way about not being in it. So there's certain things I have to pull myself away from because I'm so closely connected to it, and remind myself, you're a fan too. So I have to watch it through two different lenses, and I try to force myself to make sure the fan lens is much stronger than the journalist lens in this particular case, so I can sit back and enjoy it.
So what's it like for you on the fans lens as somebody who's from Chicago?
Just remembering what all of that run, not just the Last Dance, not the last year, but the building up to that, and what it did to the self-esteem and attitude and arrogance of this city. This team is literally what gave birth to Kanye. Kanye's entire attitude, like, you can't tell me anything. that came from this team. Cause Kanye's the only one, like you said, he's the only one to admit it. Man, this whole city felt like you couldn't tell us anything around the world because of the confidence that this team gave everybody in this city and the respect that came from, I'm from Chi, so reminding myself of all that is kind of, interesting because we've lived in pockets in that moment since then. But during that 8-year period, it was that's all it was. That's who we were.
Well, like, what did the Bulls mean to Chicago before Jordan? Because let's be honest, man, they were sorry, and their best player in the history of the franchise before that was probably like Jerry Sloan and Bob Love. Like, those are the two guys we're talking about.
Chet Walker, Jerry Sloan, Norm Van Lier, that whole squad was nice. I don't think Bob made the Hall of Fame, so no, none of them really Hall of Famers. So, it was respectable. We didn't have any expectations of anything from there. The one thing we did claim before Jordan got here, and people forgot that, is that we did have Reggie Theus. So we did have the best looking dude in the NBA and all the sports hooping for us. And all the women would come out and love Reggie Theus. So, Bomani, you say you're a music guy. Everybody talks about Puffy. Puffy brought women to hip hop. That's exactly what Reggie Theus did to Chicago. He brought the women to the game. And when women started locking in on basketball, that benefited us. So we didn't give a damn what they were winning or losing. We had Reggie Theus. And then after that, and this is what Jordan inherited. Jordan inherited Quentin Daly, Orlando Woolridge, and the late, great, at the latter stage of his career, George Gervin. So, we were building with not necessarily a team, but we did have some identity. It wasn't the best identity for, an NBA squad, but it was an identity. And then Mike came in and kind of shifted the paradigm. And, from a basketball standpoint, from the Bulls, that's what it was. But don't forget, this is still the city that gave birth to the DePaul Blue Demons, from a basketball standpoint. And then historically, all of our street ball legends, and all the cats who play ball and college ball. And we understood that we were doing, from a cultural standpoint. So just because the Bulls weren't representing what this city was about from a basketball perspective, we still had a lot of pride in what, we were able to bring to the table, culturally, basketball wise. So, the Bulls sucked, but we weren't, it didn't keep us down to know what we were about from a basketball standpoint.
And I'm guessing y'all knew what it was with Mike from day one.
I think a little bit before day one. And it was like, a lot of people don't know that when Michael came here, when Michael got drafted, we were able to see what he was able to do during, that little, global Olympic run and say, oh, this kid is nice. But he played in the Pro-Am Summer League here in the city. And the squad he played for, if you believe this or not, was the Slits Malt Liquor Bull squad. So I had to see your image of Mike playing with Slits Malt Liquor Bull on his jersey, man, on his t-shirt. It's kind of dope. That was held at Chicago State University. So we got to see him in the summer before that. And if you can imagine Michael Jordan, with no coaching, you know what I'm saying? Just
right
in a summer league, dude. So we got an early test of, oh, this cat is going to be something ridiculous. And, during the preseason, it was okay. But as I told people before, to us, it was game one when they played the Washington Bullets. And I'll date myself. I don't want to date you. I don't know if you remember this, but he went baseline and he literally tried to yoke on Jeff Ruland and Rick Mahorn, both of them at the same time. And nobody in the history of the NBA up at that time did that. That's something you just didn't do. And he did it in game one. And you know how we are in the hood. It doesn't make a difference. We're not necessarily all about execution. We're about the attempt and the effort. And the fact that his rookie first game, he showed that he didn't give a damn to that degree. That's when we all fell in love and knew, we were going to ride or die with him regardless if that was going to be his attitude. It wasn't even about the chips then.
How has nobody dug up a picture of Mike in a Slits Malt Liquor Bull t-shirt?
There's a dude, we always got those hood dudes back in the day that either were recording everything via audio or recording everything by video if they had the means to have a camera.
Right.
We got that dude here in Chicago. His name is Chucky Vision. He got all that, son. Bomani, he has all of that. He has damn near everything from probably 1978 all the way going up till now of Chicago basketball recorded. He got the document. So yeah, somebody has it. You know what I'm saying? I got the dude who got it, so it's easy.
Oh, man, because just the thought of it, right? Like the idea, because one thing I think that's interesting, and you know this about Mike, like even like that Slit Small Looking Bull thing, as manicured as Mike's image is, Mike wasn't just everywhere so diligently worried about every little detail because, oh my God, I might get caught. Like that's actually not the way that he kicks it. So like the idea, he could be like, yeah, I'm gonna wear that shirt because you ain't about to show nobody.
Right, exactly. That's kind of the MO that he got down with and David Falk got down with too. They would let people know. But here's the deal. One of the things that get lost in this whole Michael's image thing is the fact that Michael got embraced for the opposite of that, at least from our standpoint, from a Chicago standpoint and from a black standpoint, because Michael wasn't a corny dude. The people that Michael hung with were real dudes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And that was like, oh, so when we saw Mike on the South Side hooping in a team sponsored by Slit Small Liquor Bull, you know, the people that seem to think they know Mike are like, who would know for do that? Because that's bad for his image. Mike was like, no, they cool. I'm rolling with that. And that's why we appreciated him. You know, they talk about the cats that he was playing golf with. Please, man, come on, man. Mike had people around him that was real. Like very, very real. Not fake real. Like real. And that's how he got, you know, his credibility. Before America started like loving on him and this, that, and the other, Mike never shied away from, you know, that. And he never really separated one from the other. Mike just hung with people he thought that, you know, were cool with him and that respected him. And he had respect back for regardless of what you did. But he wasn't faking it, man. He kept that authentic. And that meant a lot for us. And to me, that has a lot to do with where his legacy is right now, because we saw Mike hang in a way that, you know, wasn't nothing fake about him. Nothing at all.
Yeah, like I think the fact that he was legit in the street is something that gets lost in a documentary like this. Is not going to show it. But like I remember as someone who like Public Enemy, like Nation comes out when I'm 8 years old, right? So like I'm aware of it, but I'm not in it. And a point that people always make about Public Enemy that they're like, yo, for you to understand how big they were, you got to get, man, like, yeah, this was conscious, but this was street music, right? Like KRS-One, like this is music that is reflective of the street at the time. And Jordan, when he shows up at the 85 All-Star game in the Jordan tracksuit with the chains, like as much as we think about him as being so careful and manicured, it worked because there was like an essential street level that people related to with Mike, where everybody got it, with him not really having to do anything different for any of those rooms.
Nothing. He didn't have to do anything. And he started, but I give his parents, you know, a lot of credit for that, and his brother Larry a lot of credit from that for him. Understanding that you may grow, but don't separate yourselves from anybody that looks like you. Period. You know, now to me, Michael Jordan, and this is a positive thing I'm saying right now, because I associate that with Bill Clinton. They're the two most arrogant people I've ever run into in my life, or met in my life. I don't know Bill. I've met him a couple of times. I've been around Mike long enough to say that I know him. But their arrogance is on some whole other level. And that's not a bad thing, but they know exactly who they are in every room they walk into. That is understood, you know, but that's the beauty of who they are. But I can say this about Mike, that he does it in a way that does not belittle or separate himself from who you are, regardless of what you do. You know, so if you are a drug kingpin, or if you are a corrupt senator, or, you know what I'm saying, it doesn't make a difference. In Mike's eyes, like, yo, we good. As long as we get along, as long as we cool, it ain't even about crossing me. You know, in Mike's situation, it's about losing to him. If you lose to me, we're always good. If I lose to you, that might mess up our friendship. Mike never separated that, and that's a credit to his parents, because you and I have both seen a lot of black folks that have gained a certain amount of respect and a certain amount of success. And they slowly but surely separate themselves from the people they came up with, from the people that they were once connected to, and anybody that looks like them. It's that old saying that, what is it? White water ain't wet. Right. They live by that policy. Mike was never that dude. Mike still kicked it. And I give a lot of that credit to his mom and dad for making sure that however far he rose, that he kept that was his ground.
Yeah, and I think that creates an interesting situation with him when we talk about like the politics stuff and what causes he would or would not support. Because as frustrated as people get with Mike about not wanting to support those sorts of things, you make an interesting point because he's not O.J. Simpson, right? Like he's not a dude who detached himself or divorced himself. So there's a frustration with him, but it's no one will ever be at the point where it's just like, man, forget about Mike, man. Mike ain't down for nothing, because it's not that. He has done this in a different way, but I think his attachment to black people is interesting because you could imagine there's so many people who try to tell him not to. And he's like, no, it's not how this works.
Exactly, because they're trying to look out for his best interest from a corporate standpoint, not from a cultural standpoint. And Mike has always been like very grounded in that, but he's done it, like you said, in a way that most people, I won't say especially black people, but most people haven't seen done before, or they understand that if they have seen it done before, that it equates to power, and they're going to try to diminish that. Part of the problem with that, I think that we have, especially within our culture, is that we look for absolute blackness. And in all honesty, if there is a such thing as absolute blackness, it's not, a thing that's going to benefit everybody.
Right.
Because we're not monolithic like that. So we always look for Michael Jordan in the situation of these conversations. Well, he didn't stand up. He wasn't doing this, that, and the other. But he's done stuff in so many ways. You act like he's been sitting on his behind, not doing anything. He's just doing it in a different lane. And we're not used to that. We want our black folks to be, like I said, absolute black. And when we start looking for the flawlessness in black folks, man, we'll never succeed and move forward if we're going to do that.
Yeah, I do admit, though, I get the frustration. Like, why won't you put your name on it, though, right? Like, you'll do this on the low. Like, you're going to treat us like we're outside, like we're your outside family, right? Right? Like, I get where it's just your name means so much, your voice means so much, and so them checks and stuff are cool, but I get where people are coming from. They're like, yo, man, if Mike, if you would just say this, it would go over different. But we were just talking about this a little earlier. It's almost like Mike is operating from a position of being like, actually, dog, they don't listen to me nearly as much as you think.
Exactly. That's true. And those checks that you say to mean something, at least he's distributed them in a way to black folks that nobody else in business is doing.
Yeah.
You look at look at the people just in the two franchises that he holds dear to his heart. The Charlotte Hornets and Jordan Brand. The fact that his executive teams are at least 50% black on both ends. And I'm talking about like top level presidents, CEOs. He's doing more in that capacity than any company in one sports or the fashion and shoe industry at that level. So, it's like, once again, don't act like he's not doing anything. And those checks mean something now because I'm putting them out to you all.
Right.
These checks ain't just for me. I'm having to give you all power on a whole nother end. So let me be quiet, do my thing, because if we're going to move forward in this country as a people, as black people, we need it on both ends. We need y'all to make noise, and I need to make this money so I can give us power through this money. Somebody has to handle it on both ends.
Yeah, I do look at him, though, and I say, I don't think people so much act like he doesn't do these things as much as no one brings this up. And that includes Mike. Like, it's like Mike don't want us to know that this is the way that he is kicking it.
Bad boys move in silence. That's the thing. And, he's very comfortable. Bomani, if you know Mike, he's very comfortable in what he does if he feels that he's doing the right thing. And in his mind, he's doing the right thing and he's staying consistent. Like I'm not, I've never like really gone out and made noise like that, but some people make noise, some people make moves. Mike's always been about making moves. And I hear you. There's at times I have been like frustrated and like wishing he would say something. But once again, I try to pull myself back from looking for absolute blackness. And I keep in mind, well, we need somebody in this lane doing this. So I can't ask him to do everything. My thing with us, we need to stop looking at each other to cover everything because we think they're everybody. We don't need everybody to do everything. As long as you're doing something in this movement, it can have the power to overpower what you're not doing. And, just acknowledge what he is doing as opposed to what he's not doing in this particular case.
Now, I want to switch gears just a little bit because I got you, the Chicago man, on, and the Isiah Thomas episodes have just aired on this, right? Like, one, what's your read? I'm just curious on Isiah and the Dream Team.
I think I've always believed this, and this is from talking to people. I believe it was more than Mike. that there were other individuals on this squad, including Larry Bird, including Magic Johnson at the time, and including Mike, that, didn't necessarily want him not on the team, but didn't want to spend that type of time with him during that period. Like, that's an entire month or 6 weeks that they had to spend together. And they didn't want to be in that space with him on that squad. That's one. The second part, I keep hearing from talking to people over the years, is that they had to make a choice between John Stockton and Isiah Thomas as that guard. And with Karl Malone being on the squad, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we can't lose Karl Malone. Karl Malone and John Stockton come as a package deal. And John Stockton won that.
You can lose Karl Malone, though. Like, we'll bring in Dominique Wilkins and everything will keep on moving, baby.
Yeah, but well, I'll put it to you this way, Bomani, without getting too deep into it. Think of the optics, baby. Just think of the optics. All right, think of the optics. Okay.
Got you.
All right. And third, and this is my favorite coach of all time. I love him. Chuck Daly didn't go to bat for him. Trust me. If Chuck Daly really had wanted Isiah, he could have had conversations and at least done what he could to make that happen.
Right.
Can't act like Chuck Daly didn't have that juice. Chuck was put on this team before Mike. Chuck was the first hire. Chuck basically built that team, for lack of a better terminology, because he didn't actually put it together. But he made that team. That was all his construction. I'm pretty sure if Chuck had really, really, really gone to bat for him, he could have made that happen. Or at least an attempt to make that happen. But I don't think Chuck went to bat for him. I really don't. I think Chuck played all right, all of you all got a problem with this. And I got all this front to me. This is a loss I'm going to have to take. Now, what's interesting is I wonder if Chuck ever had a conversation with Isiah about that. And if so, what was that conversation like?
Yeah, because they had to, right? Because my thing with Isiah on the team is we didn't want to get along with him. I bet ain't anybody want to spend those 6 weeks with Karl Malone country ass neither, right?
But no, he had a partner in crime.
That's right.
He and John Stockton could do their own thing solo. They're good.
That's a good point. But I feel like there was a level of peace. Like, if they had wanted to do it in such a way, the end story of this could have been how the Dream Team trip was the one where everybody made peace. Because the biggest reason to me that I feel like you absolutely have to have Isiah on the team is, if this is an Olympic team and if the Olympics matter, then, and you want to show that you're not just turning this into some crass commercialism, it's not just by adding Christian Laettner to the team. You add the dude that was supposed to go in 1980, and then there was a boycott, and we couldn't have that, right? Like, for that very reason alone, to me, you put Isiah on the team, and I feel like this thing is so important to everybody that you can get them folks in the room and you can work a whole lot of this stuff out. Like, that's always been my read on this, because where Isiah stands in basketball history, not being on that team flips everything up.
No, you're exactly right. And it's not only him. To me, the Christian Laettner thing over Shaquille O'Neal is just as bad.
Yeah.
At the time. But once again, we're dealing with optics. But with Isiah, there's so much more baggage that comes along with it. And if we dig deeper to find out if there were conversations, see what those conversations were like, those behind closed doors conversations, but to me, and I understand and agree with everything you said, but the three pillars that I just pushed out there, I can't see of a way that he even gets on that team, because of the fact that there are lead individuals. And we're not just talking about like Chris Mullin and Patrick Ewing and David Robinson. I'm talking about the three top dudes.
Yeah.
That had a problem. And I think Larry would have been like, I don't give a damn, whatever. I don't necessarily want it, but whatever. I can deal with this. I think Magic and Isiah was at such a bad place at that time and their relationship was so personal that Magic may have been like, no, I'm not dealing with this dude.
Right.
It's too personal. What they were going through, and they went through it in their little Magic Isiah thing. They were not in a good space. So, you put that on it. So now you may have a chance to lose Magic, because Magic's not going to be like Larry.
Right.
He's going to be like, nah, man, I'm not there. Y'all got to choose he or I.
Yeah, Magic don't do nothing he don't want to do.
Right, exactly. And now you got Mike, who just don't like the dude straight up. It's not personal. He just don't like him. Michael don't want to spend time with him. And as I was saying earlier, Michael, as long as you losing to him, he's cool. But Michael, if he don't like you, man, I ain't got time for this. And Michael did not like Isiah, period. They never got a chance to be friends. To even have the only way they really, 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 really knew each other is through playing basketball. And you see that didn't go too well. So not only did he not like him, he didn't have any respect for him. And Michael would have been the dude kind of like on Magic's side, been like, look, it's either he or me. That's it. And when you got in that scenario of those three players, if you're going to lose 2 to get 1, Isaiah's taking a loss, man. You cannot not have Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson on that squad for their valid reasons at that time and choose Isiah over them. You just can't do it. And on the other side, even if they do come on, you still get a chance of, well, you know, like you said, Karl Malone may not come through because who wants to hang with Karl? Karl ain't gonna do that all by himself. He needs his partner in crime. And here's the thing, Bomani. We've never seen Karl Malone basically play without John Stockton.
No, we have not.
We don't even know what that player looks like. And Karl's not going to expose himself. You saw what happened when he went to L.A. and tried to play without John Stockton.
Now, granted, he was like 85 years old, but that's real, though.
Yeah, all I'm saying is that wasn't a good look. I hear you. That wasn't a good look. That wasn't a good look. So he's not going to do that on a world stage. Trust me. They came as the package deal, man.
Now, let me ask you this about Isiah. Again, you as from somebody from Chicago. Can you explain to people what Isiah Thomas means and meant in Chicago?
That's a great question. What he means to Chicago from a basketball standpoint, and it still sticks down to this day. And this shows you how good he was. Michael kind of alluded to how good he was when Michael, as much as he doesn't like him, admitted on the last episode that he respected his game as being the second greatest point guard ever. Yeah, you know, that's a hard thing to say with somebody you don't like.
Right.
You know, cause Isiah doesn't like Mike, and you saw he didn't have Mike in his top 4, so it gets right. But Isiah has, once he walked off the court and the way they walked off the court, and it didn't help that the cameras were on him at the time when he walked off the court in that loss to the Bulls.
Right.
Chicago kind of divorced itself from him because that's not how we roll. That may be how the Detroit Pistons roll, but that ain't how we roll in Chi. You know, we may lead a court, but we don't walk in front of you and not acknowledge you at some point. There's a big difference. So, you know, where Isaiah's coming on TV and saying, and, you know, John Sally and all them saying, hey, the Boston Celtics did that. Totally different thing. The Boston Celtics did not walk in front of you and not acknowledge you. Those are two different incidents. And we in Chicago, we don't get down like that. You know what I'm saying? We may walk away from you. We don't walk in front of you and not look you eye to eye and acknowledge what you did and who you are. So Chicago had a divorce from him from that moment on. Not only did he do it to the Bulls, he didn't represent the Chi and how we roll in that moment. You know, and you did it in the Detroit uniform. So now, you know, he's excommunicated. That's kind of what he's had to deal with ever since that moment in Chicago. But here's the deal. He's still, if you come to this city to this day, and we've had some great ball players come out this city, to this day, who's the best player out of Chicago? Including Dwayne Wade, including Derrick Rose, you know, including going down the line, Anthony Davis, all these cats. It's still that dude, man. Everybody still bows down to him from a basketball standpoint, acknowledges that he is the best dude to ever come out that city. And that's saying a lot, you know, because of the personal feelings that this city carries with him going back to what happened, you know, when he walked off the court.
And for people who don't know, the Chicago that Zeke come out of is some real
Yeah, he West Side all day. He West Side. I once saw his older brother hit a dude in the jaw and break his leg.
Oh.
Yeah. Isiah was Derrick Rose for Derrick Rose. He was the protected one. He'd be on the West Side. They would not allow him to get in trouble. He was so good. He was almost a prodigy, you know, at an early age. So like at 10, 11 years old, you know, his older brothers and people on the West, everybody hooped, but he was different. He was different. You know, so you hear about cats getting that pass. He literally got his pass, and everybody on the West Side had their hands on him to make sure that he was straight. But his family, his older brothers, and his mom, Mary, was no joke. Man, please.
They made a TV movie about her.
Yeah, she was no joke. But she was a typical Chicago mother. That's a typical Chicago mother, typical Chicago woman. You know, people look at Michelle Obama and, oh, she's great. You know, they looked at Bill Wilson's mom when he passed away. And, oh, she's phenomenal, how strong she is. The strength of Chicago women, man, it's something, you know, that's unseen, I think, in any place in the world. Not that women are strong across the world, but there's a difference about the strength of Chicago women that has been on display for years and years and years. And Isiah Thomas's mom is a specific example of that. Like, you don't even know her, but she don't play. I tell people all the time, Oprah came here and stayed for a reason. Oprah came here and was like, I have never seen women like this in my entire life. I'm going to put this on display. And she's made an empire off of empowering women based on what she saw from women in Chicago on an everyday basis. And Isiah Thomas's mama was just as hard as all of her sons. I'm pretty sure there's some cats out there in the streets with their legs broken because she hit him in the head with a rolling pin. You know what I'm saying? Or whatever she did. You know, the kids she had were not just her kids. She probably raised an entire neighborhood on the west side. You know what I'm saying? But that's where he comes from.
And Isiah's still around in Chicago too, right?
That's the thing, man. He still does more for this city than athletes that still live here and athletes that came after him that's still connected to the city. He still is invested in this concrete here in so many ways, And you know what? People, I think that, you know, the forgiveness has started to trickle down a little bit, but, you know, it's still, the door has not been open and the arms are not wide for him right now. Still, even with all that he's done more for the city on a regular basis than Michael has.
I think it's like, I find it, maybe this is just me getting older, right? But like, as I watch all this stuff happen and as it's playing out in real time, as we're watching the documentary, it's kind of sad, man. Cause it's like, yo, it ain't got to be like this for none of y'all, right? Like, it's a whole lot of, you could just let this go on all sides. And cats are like, nah, but I'm not. Like Magic and Isiah, they did. Like, and the more I watch that clip, I'm like, yo, this is one of the realest things that I have ever seen. Cause they just sat there in front of each other and decided, all right, man, we're going to let this go.
Right.
Over this other stuff, though, cats are not letting it go.
But they had, at least Magic and Isiah had a history. So they had a reason to do that. And here's the thing. If you watch that clip, and I know you have, who got them back together? Their wives.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't them. So when you don't have a personal relationship and you're dealing with what everybody else is dealing with in this situation, their wives don't give a damn because their wives don't know the other wives. They don't know them. So there's no get back together. It's on the dudes to get it together. And one thing about dudes is our pride. They say the pride can get the best of us. That may be true, but I believe pride sometimes can just get in your way and not let you see anything else and blind you. And in this situation, dude's pride, and I get it because you're still in that moment still means something to you. Your pride is blocking you from seeing anything else. And if you think about it, there's nothing else there to bring them back together. There's no friendship there like Magic and Isiah had. Michael and Isiah don't have a friendship to build on. The only thing they came together with was skill and pride. You know what I'm saying? And now you're trying to get them to break down their pride and like drop the curtain on their pride to let something go. And pride is all they had to begin with.
And the interesting part, too, about them is it's not like they don't have mutuals, right? Like in Chicago, they got a lot of people in common in ways that I don't think that people quite understand. Like these are not guys who are removed from each other. No. And it still ain't happening.
Nah, but they know they never got down like that from the beginning. So there's no reason to bring them back together. And, you know, you let them come to that situation on their own. I think it's going to have to be a situation almost by happenstance. And I'll say this right now. Maybe that may be one of those things that comes out of this docuseries. You know what I'm saying? Is that they do find each other in a space by happenstance and like, come on, man, let's talk. You know, but they both have pride on their side and it's going to have to be a long conversation. Michael going to have to go through, and Isiah too. You have to be drinking Isiah champagne and Michael's tequila, you know, and it's going to take a while for them to get by it, at least to get to a serviceable place. Once again, they weren't friends in the beginning, so it won't be a kumbaya all together like, yo, we boys, like, man, it's not going to happen like that. But they could get to a serviceable place. But then again, you know, I know Isiah really, really well. I know Mike pretty well. I just don't see that happening because in all honesty, I think they're both comfortable where they are right now. I don't think either one of them feels that there's a need for us to be friends. We're good. And sometimes that happens, man.
Nah, I talked to Isiah a couple weeks ago. One thing Isiah said was, you ever hear me say anything bad about Michael? I was like, actually, I can't think of. He's like, you ever hear Michael say anything bad about me? And I was like, I don't actually have something that I can refer to. And I was like, oh, there is that.
Yeah. They stay stuck in that moment. But if you think about it, at least for Michael, that moment is part of the larger threshold of his legacy. And that moment was big to him, like huge to him in what he was able to overcome. That moment to Isiah was not as big, but it had that type of meaning in a different way. So you're looking at two individuals where their careers, both of their careers, went two totally different ways after that moment, if you really think about it.
Right.
And there's no way for them to become the people that they are right now and understand that that moment still resonates in their entire legacies. And if that's where the cells separate, then there's no way for them to get back together on that. You know what I'm saying? They don't have to say anything bad about each other, but that moment still means a lot to both of their legacies. And I don't know how, they can find a way to get past that because of what it still means. That moment is not a throwaway moment in both of their lives and what they meant to basketball and what it meant to that part of their careers. So you have to ask Michael Jordan, yo, man, Mike, just let that go. And Michael's whole thing is, man, that moment made me. If I don't get to that moment, we're not having this conversation about Michael Jordan right now. Period. So I can't exist without that moment. So that means something to him. That's like asking Kobe Bryant to forget about those air balls. That's his legacy. If he never shot those air balls, Bomani, you and I both know he never would have became the Kobe we saw. He kept that fire in him to make sure that moment never happened again. Changed him. Now, we said it with Mike, and that moment was the same with Isiah. Isiah's career he was that dude, he was doing his thing, and as much as people hated him, they really didn't have anything to hold against him from a basketball standpoint. And from, a character standpoint, as far as like not being the man that you've proven yourself to be. And that had a hit not only on his legacy here in Chicago, not only on his basketball legacy, but as you said about the dream team and all this, that had a thing on his entire legacy as it exists from the Isiah Thomas we publicly know. So he can't function forward without going back to that moment. So I wish it was as easy as we like it to be. Hey, man, y'all need to get past that, but I don't think they can because the root of part of their entire legacies is stuck in that moment. And they both know it. And because they both know it and they know they can't let it go, they'll never get beyond that because at some point, even in their own minds, it's always going to come back to that.
I want to ask you one last thing before we get out of here. And this was, I think, for a lot of people, a surprising moment of The Last Dance. Isn't your life better now that you've thought about Slim Bowler for the first time in like 20 years? Because I had completely forgotten that he existed. And I don't think I'd ever seen a picture of him. A dude who shows up to his trial in his golf outfit with his golf bag with him. And he had $57,000 in a cashier's check for Michael Jordan.
That's why people love Mike. Mike didn't care. Dude, do you know how many Slim Bowlers there are out there that like make Slim Bowler look corporate? That Michael ain't, you know what I'm saying? Michael doesn't care, man. Michael got dudes around him. So Slim is no different than cats that he, just kicks it and puts in his circle.
Right. I would have figured by 91 that the Slims of his life were out of there, right? No. I would have figured that David Falk would have swept all the Jerry Curl. Nope. Not how it went.
No, not at all. But that's my thing, and that's the appreciation for Mike. There's a thing about Mike, and it goes back to that clause he had in his contract about that love of the game clause, where it's like, look, I want to be able to make sure that I can go play basketball anywhere I want to. And Mike would do that. Mike would roll up on parks, you know what I'm saying? Outside, just hooping with iron backboards and no nets. Why does he have to do that? Because that's the way he rolls. Michael didn't separate himself from anybody. Michael didn't judge anybody. So, David Stern could tell him anything. Like, Michael, you need to stop hanging with those type of people. Man, screw you. I'm going to hang with who I hang with, period. That's how I roll. And if you can't hang with that, I'm sorry. But here's the thing. As much as from the corporate standpoint, that's frowned upon, he gets shamed because of that. That's what made us love him more. Like, dude, I saw Slim at our barbecue in our backyard last, you know what I'm saying? He that dude, He come in with a rib in his mouth and a 40 in his head. That's Slim.
I love the Slim story on it is that he was at the golf course because he had just been golf hustling, because people forget black people played more golf back in the day than they do now, right? Like that's something that gets lost. And so Slim's at the pro shop and somebody tells Slim, hey, Michael Jordan's down there playing golf. He says, so what? He said, they down there betting 50s, 100s, 200s. And the Athletic did a story about this. And Slim says Slim told somebody to go get his bag. And the quote was, we fixing to go to work.
There you go. Exactly.
Mike was there.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, it's time to get paid.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure Slim knew what he was doing because he didn't fit the description.
Right.
And I know white people were not used to seeing a brother like that being able to hustle them in golf, not in their sport. Right. So that was his game. Right. And I'm not saying Michael judged him like that. Michael probably gauged him early on, like, all right, after the first couple of holes, Michael like, dude could probably play.
Yeah.
All right, let me not just, look at that book's cover and judge that book. No, this dude could probably play. Now it becomes competition with him. Now, how well can he play? So Michael didn't care, man.
Man, Slim said Mike would invite him to the house. They have breakfast, and then they go out there and play golf. Like, I want to hear from Juanita Jordan, all the Slims of the world that came by for breakfast because Mike wanted to go compete in something against them later in the afternoon.
Dude, you don't have to go there. You can come right here to my house. Them cats are still like 4 or 5 blocks down the block. Cats are right here. They still right here. We all still together.
Man, by the way, before we let you go, I had forgotten that he played that game in Madison Square Garden in a pair of ones, and I just can't imagine trying to play a basketball game approaching the 21st century in a pair of ones.
Well, cats do what they got to do. The problem was that Michael, he got the wrong size, and they should have known that over the course of your career, especially with the socks he was wearing, your foot's gonna go, you're gonna swell, and if you put on old shoes that are made to fit the form the way they were back in the day, they shrink a little bit. So I forgot. I think Mike's maybe a 13. I forgot what size he was.
13.
Okay. He should have gotten a 13 and a half and it would have been fine. His feet would have been sore. They wouldn't have been bleeding though.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? That's the deal. Cause look, man, Rasheed Wallace went an entire career. And if you get Rasheed on the court right now, he's still gonna play in Air Force One. Yeah,
but he gets some orthotics in him. Like, I asked him about that. I was like, dude, how are you doing this? He's like, nah, man, I had to get the orthotics.
Right. And once again, Michael should have been smart about that. But I get the nostalgia, but he still should have got a half a size larger than the ones that he got. Or here's the deal. He could have changed shoes at halftime. He made his point.
Nobody would have known.
Right. Nobody would have known.
Man, that is Scoop Jackson. Check him out all over the place. ESPN. I was going to say you see him in Chicago somewhere, but I figure you at the house.
Oh, no. Yeah, I'm at the house. I'm following the rules when I can.
Hey, man, I appreciate it, man. That is Scoop Jackson. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us here on The Right Time. We do this thing here a couple times a week. My man Gabe Bassain handles everything behind the scenes. Thank you, sir. Thank you to Scoop Jackson. Also, remember, subscribe to The Right Time. Rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You only give us 4 stars, I'm inclined to believe you are a hater. And we'll talk to you guys in a couple of days. Take it easy.
Thanks for checking out The Right Time with Bomani Jones podcast.
You can listen or subscribe on the ESPN app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
The Right Time
with Bomani Jones.